You're listening to Puma Podcast.
Hi, a quick warning before we begin. This story touches heavily on the abuses committed during the Marcos dictatorship. There will be descriptions of violence throughout the episode that might be triggering for some.
Sad din, minsan may mga visitors kami martial law survivor. Tapos they will point here kung ano yung nagamit sa kanilang for torture. So it's very, very heavy na subject. Pero it's real, it happened. So we have no choice but to show the people na these things happen.
The government body tasked with memorializing victims of the Marcos dictatorship has opened a gallery to the public. In this episode, we take you on an audio tour of the space. I'm Bella Perez Rubio, Puma Podcast, and you're listening to Teka Teka.
So welcome to the Freedom Memorial Museum Gallery. So this is a small gallery lang, as you can see. And it was launched noong February during the People Power Commemoration Week.
That's James Olivar of the Human Rights Violations Victims Memorial Commission, or MEMCOM for short. He's officer in charge of the museum division.
And part nung funding na ginamit sa pagpapatayo ng gallery is the money that was recovered from the ill-gotten wealth ng Marcoses.
MEMCOM runs this gallery from their office along Panay Avenue in Quezon City. It's a small space that they managed to pack full with 9 sections. Right beside the entrance are 4 striking photographs in black and white.
So the first one is what we call the Dark Memories. So it's a portrait of 4 martial law survivors, and they were taken by Rick Rocamora, who is a Filipino photographer. And some of these photos were also exhibited sa Ateneo Art Gallery noong 50th year Declaration of Martial Law. So if you will be asking bakit silang apat yung pinili for this gallery. So silang apat kasi the 4 of them represents different sectors of society. So first si Miss Joanne Maglipon, so she represents yung media, yung press. And then si Bonnie Bonifacio Ilagan, playwright, writer, artist, and also a filmmaker. And then si Father Ben Alforque, yung religious sector. And then si Miss Judy Tagiwalo, so she represents naman the role of the youth and women during that period. So in front of it is what we call the Human Rights Violations Heat Map. So it's a map of the Philippines, and it also shows yung density ng human rights violations and saan siya sa parte ng Pilipinas nangyari. So yung data that was used for this was the 11,103 that we have na nanggaling sa HRVCB, yung claims board.
The map shows our archipelago in varying degrees of red. The darker the area, the more violations recorded there.
See the black there? It's more than 1,000.
Yes.
What's that area? Is that the
This
area
one?
that's black?
Yes, dito sa NCR, dito sa atin. Yes. Pero yung tinatanong na iba, so ibig sabihin ba nun walang nangyaring violations, for example, sa Palawan? So what we're saying is that hindi ibig sabihin na porket lighter yung color, walang nangyaring violations. It's just that limited lang din yung data that we have. Kasi marami ring mga Filipinos across the Philippines na hindi nila alam na may nangyari palang reparations. And yung iba, never naman na-document yung cases kasi walang witness, walang anything. Pero ang gusto naming ipakita dito, ultimately, na yung human rights violations, hindi lang siya sa NCR, nangyari siya sa buong Pilipinas, and na kalat-kalat siyang nangyari sa buong Pilipinas.
We also passed a scroll displaying the names of the 11,103 official victims. James told us some victims on the list have visited the gallery and looked for their
And
names.
then, beside it naman is the People Power section. And as you can see dito, may collage in front of us. And gusto naming ipakita dito is that yung people power hindi lang siya nangyari sa EDSA. In fact, nangyari siya in different parts of the Philippines. So mayroong Davao, may Baguio, Iloilo, Cebu. And yung photo dito actually ng Davao, it's fairly recent. Pero dyan sa Baguio Cathedral, nagkaroon ng series of protests during that period. Kay Nanay Suling, yung mother ni Duterte, siya yung nanguna sa Yellow Movement doon sa Davao. And then, itong video here is an interview with General Sotelo. So, si General Sotelo, during that EDSA uprising, may mga helicopters na ready to attack the people. And then si General Sotelo, siya yung gumawa ng call para ipatigil.
Here's a snippet of MEMCOM's interview with General Sotelo.
Your first loyalty when you take your oath as an officer is to the Republic. Well, somehow, you have to distinguish between the Republic and the President. You see? But when the time came to determine which loyalty you belong to, is when finally you have to make that decision. But in the course of your job as a pilot or as an officer, you have to be loyal to the Republic.
So ultimately gusto lang namin ipakita na kasi yung iba, bakit may military here to sa people power pa. Kasi gusto namin ipakita na even during that time, no, at some point in our history, yung side ng military, meron din nag-resist sa government. And at some point in our history, naging united yung mga Pilipino. And yun yung gusto naming ipakita dito.
We take you through more of the gallery after a quick break.
So yung next naman is, so medyo sensitive yung objects and yung story behind this. Ito yung tinatawag naming wall of torture. So as you can see, meron tayong different type of objects here. So, and usually yung mga kids or nagtatanong sila, ano yung gamit nung ito? For example, yung sile. So yung usually siya ginagamit as torture, nilalagay siya sa private areas. Ayun din, dito sila pinaka-interested sa rose. No? Kasi yung rose noon, ginagamit siya ng state forces for torture. Yung thorns niya, ilalagay siya sa gums, tapos hihilain siya ng ganon. So, mga ganong types of torture.
The other objects on the wall include a kitchen knife, a hammer, a washcloth, and jumper cables. They were chosen based on the affidavits filed by the victims.
And yung mostly observations ng mga people is that para silang mga normal items lang that you will see every day, pero hindi mo siya may isip na magagamit for torture.
Across the wall of torture is a section called bloodstained clothes. Encased in glass is a discolored corduroy pair of Levi's and an equally discolored graphic tee, designed in honor of South African women who led the protests against the apartheid regime.
So ito yung damit na suot ni Dr. Fidel Nemenzo, yung former chancellor ng UP Diliman. So ito yung suot-suot niya sa isang major rally noong September 27, 1984. So sa Welcome Rotonda, so mga students mostly, nagkaroon ng altercation. Nabaril siya ng state forces. And ito yung actual na damit niya. Ito pa yung bullet. So nabaril siya sa likod kasi may tinatry siyang i-shield na another student. Tapos tumagos yung bala. And then luckily, he survived. Parang, ayun, a millimeter lang close to his spine. And he survived. And ito yung actual photo nung nangyari yung shooting.
In the photograph, a young and bloody Fidel Nemenzo is being carried by at least two men.
So, na-preserve ni Dr. Fidel Nemenzo yung clothes niya. And then, dinonate niya to last year sa Memorial Commission para masama sa museum. And then, ultimately, yung gusto naming ipakita dito is yung role ng students during that time, no, ang laki nung naging sacrifice and ambag ng mga kabataan nung time ng martial law. Tapos yung maganda din dito kasi yung shirt niya, parang it's also very telling, no, kung ano yung nangyayari that time, na marami ring mga protests. Parang may trend talaga ng international solidarity.
Dr. Nemenzo's shirt depicting a South African woman reads, "Now you have touched the women, you have struck a rock, you have dislodged a boulder, you will be crushed."
Then, so ito na yung last natin, yung the 10 essential truths. So, para siyang 10 commandments, ganun. So, ginawa siya ng Memorial Commission together with UP professors. So, basically, 10 siya na yung mga usually lumalabas as fake news.
The display looks almost like glass-stained windows, but is rendered entirely in black and white. Every truth has a dedicated panel and depiction on the wall.
So, yung una is yung declaration ng martial law, yung 1081, na dineclare niya to stay in power. And then the next one is na yung different gross human rights violations that happened during that period. Ito yung imbalance ng power sa government. And then this one, yung role ng youth and ng different sectors of society sa resistance, pati yung armed struggle that it happened. Then this one, yung massive corruption that resulted sa destruction of the environment. And then this one, contrary doon sa Golden Age, yung pagkalugmok ng ekonomiya ng Pilipinas. And then this one, yung silencing of the press. Tapos ito yung role ng mga artists during that period. And then yung pang-9 is yung role naman ng church, especially during the people power uprising. And then yung last one, na yung people power, it happened not only in EDSA but across the Philippines. So, itong mga visuals, commissioned work siya ng Memorial Commission together with Filipino social realist painter si Sir Egay Talusan Fernandez, who is also a survivor, together with ang Guerrilla, yung artist collective. The sad part lang is that 2 days after we opened the gallery, si Sir Egay, he passed away. And then he never got to see yung work niya here. So, that's the sad part. Pero, we still continue yung work.
What struck me about this gallery is that so much of its content and design involved actual survivors of the dictatorship. From the faces on the wall right when you enter, photographed by a survivor of the regime, to the accounts that informed the wall of torture, to the activist who donated the bloody clothes off his back, and the artist who etched his memories onto the walls. Often, we're told that the voices that are loudest about martial law belong to young people who weren't there when it happened. The underlying implication being that we don't know what we're talking about when we condemn the impunity, the violence, and the plundering. But this exhibit is a powerful argument against that. The people who were there remember, and this is how they remember it. The Freedom Memorial Museum Gallery is open to the public, and I encourage you to check it out if you haven't already. And if you have a friend you'd like to bring with you, why don't you send them this story? Again, I'm Bella Perez Rubio. Pidoy Blanco edited this episode. Our executive producer is Jill Caro, and our editor-in-chief is Carl Javier. Keep an eye out for part 2 of this series, where we explain why it's taken Memcom so long to open the full museum they had in mind. We also ask, how important is it really to have a museum dedicated to victims of martial law? Thanks for listening.